sun fire. The steppe, a ride on a dashing races rushing up to a village with news, fairly familiar landscapes, usual ways of life, nomadic housing, but the nomads themselves are a bit out of picture here.
Lancelot! Lancelot!
The Wandering Knight, this is how Lancelot is translated from Old English, is a rare phenomenon in our places. However, it is very familiar to Hollywood productions. Producers of the period piece blockbuster King Arthur were inspired by an idea generated by British scientist Howard Reid. For example, there was a theory that Lancelot in reality was Laland Lot, meaning Alan from the Lot Valley in the southwest of France, where lots of Sarmatian burial grounds were found. The name of Arthur, another hero of this legend, also has nomadic roots, as some researchers are convinced. The roots have their origins in the Sarmatian god ARTURON, which means the sunfire. The history of great nomads lyricised by troubadours and minstrels. Chapter 1. The Dragon's Son. Great Britain, Glastonbury Abbey. This is an inclement cradle of myths and legends whose main fable is about the Knights of the Round Table and King Arthur. All the information about King Arthur is extremely obscure, contradictory and mysterious. It is a known fact that he was born in the 5th century and came here by an agreement with the Roman Emperor. He allegedly came from the steppes of either western Kazakhstan or southern Ural, or else from the Black Sea region. According to the traditional version, he was born right here. Raised by wizard Merlin, the leader of the Celtic Briton tribes became a king after he had pulled a sword out of a rock. Then he built Camelot and gathered his best warriors together. But he couldn't share GUINEVERE with one of his warriors, Lancelot. The love triangle caught intrigues, and it all finally resulted in a battle with the son of sorceress Morgan Le Fay. Badly wounded Arthur was brought precisely here, to Glastonbury, and here he found his resting place. A cross was found on the remnants of a male. An inscription on the cross made the monks suggest that the bodies belonged to King Arthur and his wife, Lady Guinevere. Inside with the skeleton with long hair, that's one supposed to be Queen Guinevere. Hello, Guinevere. This is a legend. Some more solid facts show that this land has been inhabited by the Celts since olden times. However, nomads first appeared here as early as in the 2nd century AD. Then Marcus Aurelius inflicted a defeat upon an army of Sarmatians who had invaded the territory of modern Hungary, which then was a Roman province. As a form of war indemnity, the emperor took away a few cavalry troops. Various data suggest it was up to 8,000 warriors, most of whom were sent to protect Britain, the farthest border of the empire. The other version implies that the Sarmatians came to England as mercenaries. All this was due to the belligerent character of the Sarmatians, when members of certain tribes and clans were used as frontier sentry. These were a kind of border patrol officers who first and foremost protected the area of the Roman Empire. The Arabs also hired Turkic nomadic tribes from Central Asia and brought them over here. When they fought against the Byzantine Empire, would also bring them over from Central Asia to the front. This practice was recurrent in the Middle Ages. Very scarce data has been passed on about the Sarmatian legionaries, including bas-reliefs with pictures, pieces of harnesses and necklaces, Mithrium and Hadrian's Wall, which resembles the Chinese Wall, which the Romans erected to protect themselves from the barbarians. According to scientist and consultant for Hollywood blockbuster Howard Reid, all the findings testify to the fact that the troops had been deployed in the north of the island for a few centuries and haven't lost their distinctive character, but quite to the contrary went down in Roman chronicles in entire chapters. The Romans were so impressed by the skills of the High Sarmatian cavalry that in the 3rd century all the cavalry subunits carried their banner, which was called the dragon, and the banner bearers were called the dragons. The symbol of the dragon grew so popular that when Emperor Constantinus Glorious, after having put everything in order in Britain, triumphantly entered Rome, he was surrounded by a multitude of squealing purplish dragons, which were wagging their tails in the wind. It's worth noting that according to a legend, Arthur's father was Uther Pendragon, which is literally translated as the main dragon. Generally, namely, this mythical animal is considered to be the symbol of the legendary king. That seems like a strange coincidence of banners, given the theory that in the pre-Roman times dragons and other supernatural creatures didn't exist in the local culture. However, since olden times, these symbols have been revered in the Turkic culture, for instance. The image of Arthur is matched with the image of a dragon. And even now, the British mounted infantry is called the dragoons. In general, the Sarmatians left a very deep trace in British history. They couldn't fail to impress with their customs, appearance, martial arts, the children of dragons and the fathers of knighthood. Chapter 2. Forged statues.
We were fighting the French.
We're fighting with the French. We're never fighting with Kazakhstan. So we all did a few battles. We've always fought, but we love better. When the time of a battle comes, by loosening the reins and spurring the horse on with a combat scream, he careers into the enemy like some Iron Man or forged statue. The edge of the spear is protruding forward, its lower end is attached to the horse's crop on a loop. The spear doesn't give way but gets strained and props firmly, thus inflicting a bad wound. And in its tearing onset, it stabs everything that comes its way. Images appearing in the mind evoke typical knightly battles for the kiss of a fair lady. But the quote is almost 1,000 years older than the vivid imagery. Nonetheless, many researchers concur that heavy armor known as a cataphract defined the image of a middle-aged knight. All these pieces of heavy chain armor arrived in Europe and were invented by nomads specifically for horses and people. The Europeans were ponderous warriors, and when the nomads came to Europe, they were petrified and didn't know how to fight them off. The armored armada would sweep everything on its way. The power of the blow of the cataphract spear was such that it could easily pierce two enemies. Historians suggest that neither the Romans nor the Celts possessed such a horse cavalry. Known as fearless warriors, and they considered themselves as unrivaled. Their customs and traditions didn't borrow anything from the classic societies of Europe. They had their own gods and spirits, priests and prophets. They believed that the war god who acquired the form of a miraculous sword was the most powerful. The Middle-Age writers describe that Arthur had been armored in exactly that manner. The legendary sword Excalibur, the Ron spear, and a massive ring mail, which was also very flexible to a point that a person carrying it could bend his fingers. As Sarmatians imagined, only a blue-blooded person could possess such a thing. This is the chainmail for a horse and the clothing. They're still believed to be the best and the most convenient. However, not only the martial attire connects the mysterious Sarmatians with the Knights of the Round Table. According to Ammianus Marcellinus, the descendants of the Amazons and the Scythians are, I quote, almost all of them are tall and handsome. The ancient historian adds on that although they have a ferocious gaze, they are less savage than other barbarians. Chapter 3. The Steppe Legend. Strangely, many scientists in the world, and more importantly British researchers, think that King Arthur is simply fable. The truth is that there isn't any material proof which could serve as a basis for serious academic pursuits. All the relics found by the monks before Christ have not been preserved, and so establishing whether this was King Arthur and his wife or conducting any scientific research will not be possible. This is the reason why the name is surrounded by so many legends. One of them is that King Arthur never existed, as it was allegedly a generalized character which received wider circulation 7 centuries after the legendary hero had died, precisely in the 12th century. Perhaps it was the time when he was invented in the form of so-called public relations mechanism of Glastonbury Abbey. These legendary heroes make very good material to play with because they are easy to form, to reconstruct or completely change them. Why? Because we know little about them. Any version has a right to exist. One can put it forward or reject it, but any theory is important because it generates discussions and new research efforts. And new research pieces add on new questions, such as, for instance, the latest suggested by geneticists. These are harder to argue with. A1 and B1 groups coincide between certain clans of modern people in Kazakhstan and the Celtic group of people from Scotland and Ireland. Some linguists interpret even the name Celt as a fairly common Turkic word Celt. Celt is translated from the Turkic language as Keldi. If we say Keldi, meaning have come, with the root being Celt. This means that we don't pronounce the I, and we get the word Keld, which can be translated as someone who has come over or arrived. This is why the steppe origins of King Arthur are not so preposterous. Moreover, the life of the legendary hero seems like it was almost copied from Turkic legends with many recurrences: the Kusanagi, the cup, and the promised comeback. This is an epos about Korkut-Ata. The elderly Korkut was a wise leader of clans who managed to bring them together and bring peace among them and eliminate feud. By using his authority and power, he managed to leave behind the legacy of a hero who was much more important than King Arthur.
О герое гораздо, я считаю, гораздо более значимым, чем король Артур.
When we talk about Korkut-Ata or Asan Kaygı, we also mean generalized characters. These are people who, when they died in the battles for their homelands, they left to their descendants a hope that when a difficult time of danger comes, they will return. The intersecting parallels show that the French think he's theirs, the Italians believe that Artorius was born in Rome, the British are sure that British blood ran in his veins, the Ossetians argue that he belongs to them. Why then he can't be a Sarmatian from the Kazakh steppes? The most mysterious and attractive myth of the old world, the Dark Middle Ages and the Sunfire. Arthur? Who is Arthur? People say that he doesn't know what a defeat is, and I heard he's a great warrior.